Well, and my mom and I, it was at that, we sort of put it in a big pot and was like, okay, you did that movie, we get a car.
Hollywood made Brooke Shields famous before she was even old enough to fully understand what fame meant. From controversial movie roles to worldwide ad campaigns, she spent her teenage years under relentless public attention. But behind the glamour was a growing discomfort she didn't yet know how to explain. Now, Brooke is speaking candidly about one interview from the early 1980s that left her feeling exposed in front of the world. At the time, nobody questioned it, nobody stopped it. But decades later, the moment feels impossible to watch the same way. And it reveals far more about Hollywood than people realized. The childhood fame, almost destroyed. From the very beginning, Brooke Shields seemed to be living a life that felt less like a normal childhood and more like a Hollywood script already in motion. And after growing up under that kind of constant spotlight, it's not hard to understand why she once seriously thought about walking away from Hollywood altogether. At one point, she imagined a completely different future for herself, one that had nothing to do with cameras, movie sets, or magazine covers. She had always loved animals, and over time she became close friends with well-known animal advocate Joan Embery, after meeting her during an appearance on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. The friendship sparked something in Brooke. For the first time, she could picture a life outside celebrity culture. Trying to figure out who she really was beyond the fame, Brooke even interned at the San Diego Zoo to explore the possibility of working with animals professionally. It's strange to think about now, but there was a very real moment when the world almost lost actress Brooke Shields and gained zoologist Brooke Shields instead. But even as she questioned her future, the tabloids never stopped following her. By the late 80s and early 90s, Brooke's personal life had become constant headline material. The media treated every friendship, every dinner, and every public appearance like evidence of another Hollywood romance. Some of the rumors were completely exaggerated, but others were very real. Looking back at her dating history from that era feels almost like flipping through a list of celebrity royalty. Her name became linked to stars like Scott Baio, John Travolta, George Michael, and John F. Kennedy Jr. Her relationship with John F. Kennedy Jr. especially felt like something pulled straight out of an American fairy tale. Brooke later revealed that she'd had a crush on JFK Jr. since childhood. Her mother used to point him out and joke that he was the boy she would someday marry. Years later, that childhood fantasy unexpectedly became real when the two finally went on a date during a ski trip in Aspen. The night seemed perfect at first. They spent time together at a bar before heading back toward his hotel, and Brooke later described their kiss as one of the best she had ever experienced. For a moment, it felt like the beginning of something huge. But Brooke pulled back before things became more serious. It wasn't because she lacked feelings for him. If anything, it was the opposite. She knew herself well enough to understand that becoming intimate would mean emotionally giving him everything, and that vulnerability terrified her. The dream quickly unraveled after that. Instead of walking her home or making sure she was okay, JFK Jr. simply let her leave alone in a cab. Brooke found the moment surprisingly cold, but what hurt even more came the next day. He barely acknowledged her existence. According to Brooke, he avoided eye contact and acted as though nothing meaningful had happened between them at all. For her, it became one of those painful moments where fantasy collided hard with reality. Around the same time, another relationship in Brooke's life started drawing enormous public fascination: her friendship with Michael Jackson. The connection began when Brooke was just 13 years old. They met at the Academy Awards after she casually asked Michael if he was going to an after-party. That simple conversation sparked a friendship that would last for decades. What Brooke didn't know at the time was that Michael had already been fascinated by her long before they officially met. He later admitted he had photos of her covering the walls of his room and claimed he stayed awake until sunrise after meeting her, overwhelmed with excitement. As the years passed, rumors exploded around them. The public became convinced they were secretly dating, especially because they appeared together so often at events. But Brooke consistently denied that there was ever a romantic or sexual relationship between them. Michael, however, sometimes described things very differently. The confusion reached its peak during Michael's famous 1993 interview with Oprah Winfrey. While discussing his personal life, Michael openly admitted that he was in love with Brooke Shields and even suggested they were romantically involved. The problem was that Brooke had absolutely no idea they were supposedly dating. After the interview aired, she reportedly called Michael directly to confront him about it. To Brooke, his public comments felt less romantic and more disconnected from reality. She was trying to build something resembling a normal adult life, and she didn't want to be pulled into the chaos surrounding his public image. Despite the awkwardness, the friendship survived. Over the years, Brooke continued shutting down the dating rumors while occasionally sharing stories that revealed just how emotionally unusual their relationship could be. In one memorable moment, she recalled Michael suddenly trying to kiss her in the back of a limousine while photographers crowded outside. Brooke immediately stopped him and reminded him that their relationship worked best as a friendship. And honestly, friendship seemed to be exactly what both of them needed. Behind all the tabloid speculation, their connection was surprisingly ordinary. According to Brooke, most of their time together involved eating junk food, going to movies, and escaping the pressure of fame for a few hours. Instead of acting like a glamorous Hollywood power couple, they behaved more like two lonely former child stars trying to hold on to a sense of normalcy. That shared understanding became the foundation of their bond. Michael understood the emotional isolation that came with growing up famous, while Brooke represented something he felt he could never fully experience himself: a semi-normal adult life outside the fantasy world of superstardom. Brooke later explained that Michael often asked surprisingly innocent questions about dating and relationships, almost like someone trying to understand experiences he had never properly lived through. It sounded strange at times, but underneath it was something deeply sad. Both of them had lost huge pieces of childhood to fame, and in many ways, they were still trying to figure out adulthood together. Brooke later admitted their friendship went even deeper emotionally than most people realized. Michael once floated the idea of having a child together, though Brooke never interpreted it as a traditional marriage proposal. To her, it felt more like Michael searching for a partner who could help him build the kind of family and happiness he always struggled to find on his own. Interestingly, Michael described their relationship much more romantically whenever he spoke about it publicly. He openly claimed they loved each other deeply and insisted they had dated frequently, even if Brooke didn't necessarily define the relationship the same way. Still, one thing remained true on both sides: the affection between them was real. And Michael wasn't the only major celebrity Brooke became involved with during that chapter of her life. She also spent time dating George Michael during the height of Wham's popularity. At the time, Brooke genuinely believed he was one of the kindest and most gentlemanly men she had ever met. Their relationship seemed promising at first, but it ended almost as quickly as it began. George eventually told her he needed to focus entirely on his career, leaving Brooke heartbroken and confused. Years later, with a fuller understanding of George Michael's personal struggles and private life, the breakup made a lot more sense in hindsight. But back then, Brooke experienced it the way many young people experience first heartbreaks, with complete emotional devastation. And unfortunately for her, those disappointments were only the beginning. The pressure behind the spotlight. By the time Brooke Shields reached her early 30s, she had already lived through enough chaos, heartbreak, and public scrutiny to fill several lifetimes. But after years of unstable relationships and emotional ups and downs, she finally believed she had found someone who truly understood her. That person was Agassi. At the time, Agassi was one of the biggest stars in sports, a wildly talented tennis champion with a rebellious image and a reputation as the sport's resident bad boy. Their connection started casually after meeting at one of his matches, but because both of them were constantly traveling, they couldn't spend much time together in person right away. So instead, they built their relationship the old-fashioned way. Long before texting and FaceTime existed, Brooke and Andre got to know each other through deeply personal letters sent back and forth over fax machines. Strange as it sounds now, those late-night messages became the foundation of their relationship. The more they talked, the more they realized how much they had in common. Both had been pushed into fame at incredibly young ages. Both had grown up under the control of demanding parents. Both understood what it felt like to live under constant public pressure, while privately struggling to figure out who they actually were. For Brooke, that emotional connection felt powerful. After everything she had been through, she genuinely believed she had finally found stability. And for a little while, it almost seemed true. Brooke later credited Andre with helping her create distance from her mother and begin building an independent adult life for the first time. After years of existing under Terry Shields' shadow, Andre gave her space to breathe. He helped her navigate ordinary adult responsibilities and encouraged her to take more control over her own world. But slowly, the relationship started revealing cracks. What initially felt protective and caring began turning into something far more controlling. Brooke eventually realized that many of the possessive tendencies she had escaped with her mother were now reappearing in her marriage. It became one of those painful situations where freedom quietly transformed into another emotional trap. At the exact same time, her personal life was becoming more unstable. Her career unexpectedly hit a major turning point. Until the mid-1990s, Brooke had mostly been viewed as a dramatic actress and former child model. Then came her unforgettable guest appearance on the hit sitcom Friends. On the show, Brooke played Erica, an obsessive fan of Joey Tribbiani's soap opera character, Dr. Drake Ramoray. Erica genuinely believed Joey was the doctor he portrayed on television, and Brooke leaned fully into the role's ridiculousness. Her performance was loud, chaotic, awkward, and absolutely hilarious. For the first time, audiences got to see Brooke's comedic side. The appearance became such a success that it directly led to her starring role on the sitcom Suddenly Susan. Professionally, it was exactly the kind of reinvention she needed. Unfortunately, the moment became memorable for another reason too. Andre Agassi attended the live taping of the Friends episode, sitting in the audience while Brooke filmed one of the show's more over-the-top scenes. During the episode, her character grabbed Matt LeBlanc's hands and aggressively licked his fingers as part of the comedy. The audience laughed. Andre did not. According to Brooke, he became furious watching the scene unfold, while everyone else understood it as harmless sitcom humor. Andre reportedly stormed out of the studio feeling humiliated and convinced people were laughing at him personally. Brooke was stunned by the reaction. To her, it was obviously comedy. But instead of celebrating one of the biggest professional moments of her career, the night quickly turned into another emotional crisis centered around Andre's jealousy and insecurity. Things only got worse after they got home. Brooke later revealed that Andre completely lost control and smashed many of his own tennis trophies during the argument. Considering the level of success he had already achieved, the destruction was staggering. By that point, Agassi had already built one of the most impressive careers in tennis, with Grand Slam victories and finalist trophies from tournaments like Wimbledon, the US Open, the Australian Open, and the French Open. Watching him destroy pieces of his own legacy left Brooke scrambling into what she later described as fixer mode. Instead of processing her own feelings, she immediately focused on trying to replace the damaged trophies because she wanted their future children to someday understand what their father had accomplished. It said a lot about the emotional dynamic of the relationship. Ironically, while her personal life was spiraling, Brooke's career was finally stabilizing. Suddenly, Susan became a hit and mirrored much of what Brooke herself was experiencing behind the scenes. The show followed a woman learning how to stand on her own after ending an unhealthy relationship, and audiences connected strongly with it. The success earned Brooke a People's Choice Award, along with 2 Golden Globe nominations. After years of being treated mainly as a former child star or controversial celebrity figure, she was finally being recognized as a legitimate comedic actress in her own right. Still, despite all the warning signs in her relationship with Andre, the two pushed ahead with marriage. Their wedding in Monterey, California, became a massive celebrity spectacle. There was an elaborate gown with a dramatic 5-foot train, a full string ensemble, performances from the San Francisco Boys Choir, and paparazzi helicopters hovering overhead throughout the ceremony. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. Inside the relationship, though, both of them already knew something felt wrong. Years later, Brooke and Andre would each admit that they had experienced almost immediate regret after getting married. Andre later confessed that on his wedding day, part of him already wished he could leave. Brooke described waking up the next morning with a sinking feeling that she had wanted the wedding itself far more than the actual marriage. Their schedules kept them apart constantly, and emotionally, they seemed to be moving in completely different directions. Less than 2 years later, the marriage collapsed. But before the divorce officially happened, Brooke learned something that shocked her even more. At one point, Andre finally confessed that he had secretly been using crystal meth during a significant portion of their relationship. In his autobiography, Open, Agassi later spoke candidly about his drug use during the 1990s and admitted he had lied to tennis authorities to hide it. Looking back, he described that period as one of the darkest chapters of his life, a stretch where he stopped winning, stopped caring, and slowly unraveled emotionally. For Brooke, the revelation was devastating. Not only was she hurt by the addiction itself, but she couldn't understand why he had hidden something so serious from her for so long, especially because she had already accepted many of his insecurities and private struggles without judgment, including the fact that he wore a hairpiece during much of his tennis career. The divorce that followed became deeply bitter. At one point during the split, Andre allegedly warned Brooke that things would have been far uglier if they had children together. The comment only reinforced how toxic the relationship had ultimately become. Thankfully, Brooke's next chapter would look very different. And strangely enough, it all started because of a dog. From chaos to unexpected love. In 1999, shortly after separating from Agassi, Brooke met Chris Henshey in the most unexpected way. Brooke had recently gotten an American bulldog named Darla and brought the dog along while visiting friends at a gym on the Warner Brothers lot. At some point, Darla wandered off. Chris Henshey ended up being the person who brought her back. At the time, Henshey was working nearby as a screenwriter and producer. The two started talking casually, and Brooke immediately noticed how funny and easygoing he was. Coming out of such an emotionally exhausting marriage, she wasn't looking for another serious relationship. But even then, there was an undeniable spark between them. Over the following weeks, they continued spending time together while working around the same television project in Washington, D.C. Brooke was drawn to how thoughtful, grounded, and genuinely kind Chris seemed compared to the chaotic personalities she had spent much of her life around. Still, she wasn't entirely sure she was emotionally ready for another commitment. After the end of her marriage, Brooke briefly convinced herself she wanted a wild, carefree single phase. She joked openly about wanting to finally sow her oats after spending so much of her life in serious relationships. The problem was, reality didn't exactly cooperate. According to Brooke, her attempts at casual dating went nowhere. Meanwhile, even after separating from Chris for a short period, she couldn't stop calling him. Eventually, Chris finally pushed back and reminded her that breakups actually meant separation. Oddly enough, that moment of honesty clarified everything for Brooke. She realized she didn't want to lose him at all. The two reunited, dated seriously for 2 years, and eventually got engaged during a trip to Mexico when Chris proposed with an antique cushion-cut diamond ring. Even their wedding carried a strange Hollywood twist. At first, tabloids reported that Brooke and Chris had secretly married during a private beach ceremony on Catalina Island in 2001, but the entire story turned out to be fake. The false wedding had actually been staged to throw paparazzi and, more importantly, a longtime stalker off their trail. Their real wedding happened later in Palm Beach during a private Roman Catholic ceremony at a luxury estate. This time, Brooke finally seemed to find the stability she had spent her entire life searching for. As her personal life settled down, she also continued expanding her career. After conquering modeling, film, and television, Brooke shifted her focus toward Broadway. She eventually became the first performer ever to star in 3 iconic productions: Chicago, Cabaret, and Grease. But even with all her professional success, Brooke still felt one dream remained unfinished. She desperately wanted to become a mother. Brooke and Chris decided early in their relationship that they wanted children, but starting a family turned out to be far more difficult than expected. Years earlier, Brooke had undergone surgery to remove precancerous cells, and the procedure left scarring on her cervix that complicated her ability to get pregnant. The process became emotionally draining. Through fertility treatments, failed attempts, and endless medical appointments, Chris remained her biggest source of support. Brooke often spoke about how his humor helped carry them through some of the hardest moments. After unsuccessful attempts with artificial insemination, the couple eventually turned to IVF. Brooke later admitted the process was physically painful and emotionally exhausting for both of them, but they stayed committed to facing it together. Finally, after multiple setbacks, their last IVF attempt worked. On May 15, 2003, Brooke gave birth to their first daughter, Rowan Frances Henchy, in New York City. Brooke later remembered hearing her baby cry for the first time while James Taylor's song, "How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You," played in the background, creating a moment that felt almost cinematic. The name Rowan reflected the couple's love of Irish names and folklore, while her middle name, Frances, honored Brooke's father, who had passed away from prostate cancer only weeks before Rowan's birth. But shortly after becoming a mother, Brooke entered one of the darkest periods of her life. Following Rowan's birth, she developed severe postpartum depression. The experience completely blindsided her and placed enormous strain on both her mental health and her marriage. Brooke later admitted that she initially felt almost no emotional connection to her newborn daughter. Instead of joy, she felt numbness, fear, and despair. The lack of maternal instinct terrified her and pushed her into an incredibly dark emotional state, where she began experiencing suicidal thoughts. At her lowest point, she considered overdosing on medication or crashing her car. Meanwhile, Chris struggled to understand what was happening to the woman he loved. Brooke later recalled moments where he broke down emotionally himself, confused by the fact that she barely interacted with the baby or seemed emotionally present. Eventually, Brooke sought medical help and was prescribed antidepressants. At first, she resisted taking them because of the shame surrounding mental health treatment at the time, but Chris encouraged her to try, reassuring her there was nothing wrong with getting help. Slowly, the medication and treatment began helping her recover. Wanting to speak openly about what she had survived, Brooke wrote her memoir, Down Came the Rain. The book became incredibly important for many women struggling with postpartum depression, especially during a time when the condition was still heavily stigmatized. Not everyone supported her openness, though. One of her loudest critics became Tom Cruise, who publicly criticized Brooke for using antidepressants and speaking positively about psychiatric treatment. As a Scientologist, Cruise strongly opposed psychiatry and made controversial public comments attacking antidepressant use altogether. Brooke didn't stay silent. She fired back publicly, arguing that Cruise's comments were harmful and dismissive toward women genuinely suffering from postpartum depression. Her response was sharp, confident, and widely praised, especially by women who felt seen and defended by her willingness to speak out. Eventually, Cruise privately apologized to Brooke, acknowledging the damage his comments had caused. Brooke accepted the apology, and over time, the tension between them faded completely. In fact, Cruise later invited Brooke and Chris to attend his wedding to Katie Holmes. For Brooke Shields, it was another reminder that even after decades of public battles, painful relationships, and personal struggles, she was still standing and still finding ways to move forward. Brooke Shields, I Was Exploited and Everyone Watched. Brooke Shields is finally opening up about one of the most uncomfortable moments of her early fame. And in doing so, she's shining a light on just how intense life was for young women in Hollywood during that era. While appearing on The Drew Barrymore Show alongside Ross Matthews, Shields reflected on a past interview with legendary television host Barbara Walters, an experience that left her feeling exposed and deeply uneasy. Looking back now, she can clearly see how inappropriate the situation really was, even if, at the time, she was too young and inexperienced to fully process it. To understand why that interview hit so hard, it helps to understand the world Brooke Shields was growing up in. Long before she was old enough to fully understand fame, she had already become one of the most talked about young actresses in America. At just 12 years old, she starred in Pretty Baby, a controversial film where she played a child sex worker. Not long after that came The Blue Lagoon, another project that placed the teenage actress in heavily sexualized situations on screen. The attention surrounding those films made Shields famous almost overnight, but it also placed her under a microscope that never seemed to go away. Then came the Calvin Klein ads in 1980. Brooke was still just a teenager, but the campaign turned her into a global celebrity and intensified the public obsession with her image. Years later, Shields admitted that the constant sexualization of young girls in entertainment wasn't unique to her story. Speaking with The Guardian, she reflected on how society has always been fascinated with youth, explaining that while the forms may change over time, the pressure itself never really disappears. For her, survival came down to refusing to see herself as a victim, even while navigating situations that often crossed clear boundaries. One of those moments came during her 1981 interview with Barbara Walters. According to reports, Walters asked the 15-year-old actress to stand up during the interview so the two could compare body measurements on camera. Shields now looks back on that moment with disbelief. Sitting with Drew Barrymore decades later, she described feeling as though she was being displayed rather than interviewed. She remembered standing there confused, watching an adult woman compare herself to a teenage girl while cameras rolled. At the time, Brooke didn't know how to push back. She was still new to Hollywood, still learning how the industry worked, and like many young stars back then, she believed the safest thing to do was smile, stay polite, and get through it. But internally, she felt completely taken advantage of. What bothered her most was the feeling that the interview wasn't really about understanding her as a person. Instead, it felt like an attempt to create a shocking moment that would generate headlines. Looking back now, Shields has described the entire experience as practically criminal, even questioning whether it could honestly be called journalism at all. And that's what makes her story hit so hard. Being a teenager is already uncomfortable. Most people spend those years trying to figure out who they are in private. Brooke Shields had to do it while the entire world watched, judged, and constantly commented on her body. But with time came perspective. Instead of letting those experiences define her, Shields says they eventually taught her one of the most important lessons of her life: the power of saying no. That lesson became a turning point, helping her reclaim confidence and control after years of feeling like other people dictated how she should look, act, and exist in public.